mission is to build a future where no one needs to come out anymore. Together, we can create a world where everyone has the right to love, to succeed, to have a family, and to live a full, happy life.
Welcome back, everyone. Our guest today is Ron, and I will ask Ron to introduce himself.
My name is Ron Poole-Dayan. I'm the Executive Director and Founder of Men Having Babies.
Thank you. And let's just jump right in. Why Men Having Babies and what this organization does?
I should first say that my husband and I have twins that were born with the help of a surrogate, and they are now 18 years old. If you do the math, we started our journey more than 20 years ago, as it turns out, in the prehistoric days of surrogacy, or at least gestational surrogacy. Years after that, looking back at the very, very few or the non-existent resources we had at the time, started a process that eventually led to the creation of Men Having Babies.
Beautiful. Is it safe to say that your own experience in having your own children was the seed of the organization you are leading today?
Exactly right. Although sometimes ignorance is bliss, in the sense there were so many things we didn't know, and we, of course, survived through it. But it was painfully evident also that we were blind. We were walking into this with fairly little information. At the time, it seemed to us, on the one hand, that we're the last gay couple in Manhattan that doesn't have children. But of course, once we started asking around, it was obvious that this is not very simple. I stayed home with the kids full time after they were born. Years after, when they were 3.5, actually, I went to the LGBT Center here in New York and said, why don't we start a group for men who are interested in surrogacy? They already had some groups for intended parents, but they were mostly for women or for people who were interested in adoption and foster care. So that was the seed that later led to start of an annual seminar and then a conference, and then incorporating Men Having Babies as a separate, independent, not-for-profit organization in 2012.
Wonderful. Absolutely amazing. And before we go and talk about your organization, I am just curious, how was it 20 years ago to be in same-sex couple and want to have babies?
As I said, on the one hand, you always feel like you live in the definitely present, but sometimes in the future. You're mostly aware of how things are better than they were the way they used to be. So we felt that certainly, why not? If we want to have a family, nothing should stop us. We assumed it's doable. Maybe just general disposition. It was also not simple in the sense that there was no such thing as egg donation back then. We were lucky to have Greg's sister, my sister-in-law, who was willing to donate her eggs. Most surrogacy at the time was done the way we now refer to traditional surrogacy, which is that surrogate is also the egg donor or the genetic mother without IVF. However, we felt uncomfortable about that, felt that how do we really know how she's going to feel when it's time to part with the baby, which would be genetically hers. So not being educated about, not seeing any, articles or discourse around the topic, we just, I mean, it's actually funny. We went to our rabbi. We're part of an LGBT synagogue. And she did our premarital counseling, and then she helped us think through it. And we were saying, how about if we found somebody to donate her eggs? And we just assumed it was just a matter of, simple, procedure. We were lucky to have eggs donated from a member of the family. Of course, it was my sperm that we used. And, with 2 tries, etc., which could still be the case even today. So I don't think, looking back, that it was overly, arduous, problematic in any way. But of course, when the kids came, we always tell them now, when you talk about it as adults, say that we had to create the future world back then. We had to pretend that we, in 2001, 2002, 2003, that we were already living in, the Obama era, in the sense that we had to prepare their school teachers in advance. We had to do some, preparation with classmates, parents, and families. So they grew up not noticing any problems at all. But it wasn't completely without effort on our behalf. But I don't feel like we created a fake world. We just created the world of, 8 or 9 or 10, 10 years earlier.
Yes, incredible. And thank you for being that parent and for parenting from a place of this is our family, this is our norm, and it's all good.
It helped that we're in New York City. It probably would have taken a lot more effort if we were, in South or some other, area that is welcoming.
Right, right. And even so, what was the most challenging part in that time?
It's really hard to imagine now, but we would literally walk down the street with, a double stroller, the two of us, and be taunted by teenagers who even at one point even threw stones at us. It may sound, on the one hand, I said, we are in New York, but at one point I literally chased one of them to the school, the private Catholic school that, they go to. And I went to the principal and I said, this is what happened. I once chased, a couple of kids to a pizza place where they tried to hide. And after doing that, and took a photo of one of them in order to be able to then go and take it further. So there were incidents like that. There were, some extra drilling at border checkpoints. And as I said, you try to, because the kids initially are oblivious, then later they listen. Mm-hmm. So you try to keep your composure and politely, answer the questions. As I said, it wasn't overly traumatic. I mean, now looking back at that, it sounds, pretty awful, but we just felt, because it wasn't new to us. We knew we lived in a society that wasn't fully accepting, but we just felt that this is doable, and it was.
Mm-hmm. Yet heterosexual couples, they did not need to deal with this kind of situations.
I think society changed immensely, I know, at least in this part of the country.
Yes, and it continues to change around the world little by little. And getting back to your family, was there any conversation with your children about the fact they have 2 dads and no mom?
Not quite. The fact that none of us is female was obvious to them. They never asked the question, where is mother? Because I always tell people, because that's a question sometimes prospective parents still ask, although less and less so. They are born into reality. They know who their parents are. By the time they speak, they already know who their parents are. So it never comes to them as a surprise. The questions are different. The questions are, the first question, my son was, for some reason, maybe typical or not, less concerned sometimes about those questions. But my daughter wanted to know, she didn't want to know. She assumed she came from my tummy when she realized that there are other parents in the playground that have big tummies. Mm-hmm. She, didn't bother with the fact that those parents with big tummies carrying a baby were female and I was male. That was insignificant in her mind. She just assumed that I was the primary caregiver at the time, that she came out of my tummy and not my husband. So there was a little discussion then. And then as their linguistic comprehension skills progress over time, you have those discussions again, but it's never, where is my mother? How come I don't have a mother? That doesn't cross their mind. They know who their parents are. They know, just as they know that they don't have a parent who's red hair, they know they don't have a parent who is female. The question is not begged, how come you're not X? Mm-hmm. But the question is more, so how were we born? And the easiest answer, even if, you're a heterosexual parent, it would have been probably much easier to tell your kids that you went to the hospital to make them. It's much more believable than the, procreation story, which to small children at least sounds quite peculiar. So they had no problem ever understanding how they came to the world. And over time, they understood that they were exceptional, that they were, it's not the norm, but they always also were exposed to kids of similar circumstances, so they didn't think they were abnormal.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. And what will be your advice to intended parents or new parents that they are growing similar families like yours?
First of all, let me say that at our conferences, we also have teen panels. Where teenage children of parents who had them through surrogacy, of gay parents who had them through surrogacy, talk themselves about their perspective. So these questions, I'm usually not asked that question. It's kids who are, sometimes even my kids, that are being asked that question. And all of these panels, by the way, are on our YouTube channel, if you're interested in looking at that. So those questions are asked, and they even ask, what would be your advice? So it's funny because all of a sudden I felt like I was on the teen panel. But so it's really their advice is, go for it and, don't hide anything and always talk to your children about, always give them the answer to the question they're looking for. But don't go overboard. A lot of times people have a tendency in many other circumstances, especially this one, to, over explain, be comfortable with yourself. And that's something actually I tell people way before the children exist. I tell them, come to this conference, figure out whether surrogacy is good for you. Our conferences are not conferences that advocate for people to have children through surrogacy. Our conferences are there intended to people to figure out whether that's the right parenting method for them. And if so, explain and give them access to resources, what's the best way to go about it. We tell them this is one day going to be the birth story of your child.
Yes.
If you're not comfortable with that, it'll come out. If there's anything about this process that you're not comfortable about, it will live with you and it'll be communicated to your children, even if you are even unintentionally.
Yes.
So the first thing you need to do is sit here. This is why we also have a panel we call a mindful look at surrogacy. Thinking through those issues pertaining both to the process. Because one of the first things that people ask is, would it be that awkward to have a person who currently I don't even know, so a complete stranger, who all of a sudden does this most intimate thing for us? Would it be awkward to go through it? Wouldn't it be awkward to feel for the rest of my life that I'm indebted so much to a person like that? For many people, that is at least equal weight of a concern initially as perhaps issues of access, financial and otherwise. So that is a major thing we tell people. Feel comfortable about it, because the people you're working that are going to help you to have a child, you feel comfortable about it, and then one day your children are going to want to know and going to see a smile and going to want to see your eyes shining, talking about the two wonderful women who helped you have your children.
Yes, beautiful. You mentioned about these conferences where intended parents could get more information and prepare themselves for creating their families. Please tell us more about that.
Men Having Babies is actually two organizations. It's Men Having Babies conferences, and it's the Gay Parenting Assistance Program, or as we call it, GPAP. So MHB and GPAP. So the conference side of the organization is where we provide people information, guidance by peers and experts on how to become parents. While there is ample material or resources online, as we all know, it is very easy to get lost among all this material. It gets mixed with an incredible amount of material resources that are coming from commercial interests, and many times even guised in as if they were coming from organizations that have names that may sound like they are community organizations, but they're not. So it is very difficult first to navigate that, and you need some sort of an editorial authority. Somebody tell you, these are the things you need to know first. Here's an introduction to those concepts. Here's elaboration on those concepts. And from what we've learned, because we tried webinars and we have documents on the website, etc., and even people are able to virtually almost experience an entire conference by going on our YouTube channel. There is no substitute, and we get numerous testimonials saying that there's no substitute to actually immersing yourself. Taking a weekend to immerse yourself in these issues, go through this gradual process of understanding the basics, and then being able to dive further, deeper into the financial, medical, legal, psychological, ethical aspects of the process. And also have access to people where you can interact and talk to them about this, because of course you might have questions that may not necessarily be addressed otherwise, and interact with a large group from the professional community, lawyers, doctors from clinics, and agency owners that are going to be there potentially to help take you through the next step if you're ready to move forward, or at least be able to shop around and try to figure out if any of these professionals are good for you.
Fantastic. For how long are you holding these conferences, and where?
We've been doing it since 2012, as I mentioned, as an organization, but the conference actually started in 2005. So we're celebrating this November our 15th conference in New York already. So it has evolved. Conferences have evolved, a lot of trial and error. We have always, satisfaction surveys or feedback surveys from both the providers and the attendees. Now they're a day and a half. We have conferences in New York, Chicago, San Francisco, and Florida domestically, and Brussels, Taipei, Tel Aviv, and Toronto internationally. We have members in our organization, more than 8,000 throughout all these different continents. And we have partnership with local LGBT family associations in anywhere where we have these conferences, which is even more crucial for for GPAP, for the Gay Parenting Assistance Program. So the first thing is, and sometimes the word conference might be misleading in the sense that it is not a scientific conference. It's not a place where you go and you go to, one session about this medical aspect, another session about, that legal, point. It is really designed as a course, as a board chair defined it once as a boot camp. It's necessary to try to fit it in a day and a half or almost 2 days. And we just build it just in a way that is absorbable and digestible, but it's still pretty intense. We have a happy hour. We have, a teen panel. We have a personal stories panel. So not everything is very serious, but it's still a lot to digest and also an amazing, empowering experience, since those conferences tend to be more than 200 intended parents and about 100 professionals each.
Well, I have the pleasure to participate in your conference in Taipei a few weeks ago. And by the way, thank you again for inviting me.
It was my pleasure.
And I was super impressed with how everything was organized. The speakers, the content was just absolutely incredible. And I'm curious, what led you to the decision of bringing Men Having Babies conference in Taiwan?
Well, we wanted to come to the half of the world, the half of the hemisphere where we haven't had any conferences yet in general, but in particular, we wanted to come to the region where we know a lot of people have been coming recently, more than before, to the United States for surrogacy. So we've seen a growing number of people coming from mostly China, mainland China, but also places like Hong Kong, Singapore, and Taiwan. Of course, there have been people coming from Australia even before that, but as the growing number of interested intended parents were coming to the United States, we felt that there was a gap between the level of readiness and awareness for this new group of people compared to the people who've been issued or been exposed to some of the discourse about this for many years. And with linguistic gaps or barriers and the cultural differences, it became an especially big challenge for us to try to expand that awareness to this large group of people coming.
Yes. And boy, was not that a large group of people. You have how many? Like over 300 people attending?
Yes, we had over 320 people there, intended parents at any point in time, with another more than 100 professionals. So it was a pretty, energetic party.
Impressive. Now, tell us how two men that want to have baby through surrogacy could do that into a country where surrogacy is illegal.
So surrogacy is not legal in almost the entire world. There are very few exceptions, and where there are some exceptions, it is also typically not open to people from outside of that country or not open for same-sex couples. So the reality is that for same-sex couples to have a child with the help of a surrogate openly and legally, they currently only, if they're not residents of the UK or South Africa, where they can do it domestically, they have to come to the United States or Canada. In that regard, Taiwan or China or Hong Kong are not that exceptional. What is more of a problem is that the issue of the distance and the cultural and the linguistic barriers. And the reason this is important, because of course, people, undertake a lot of interactions across cultures, languages, and miles of distance. What's important here is that surrogacy in particular is not some sort of a commercial exchange. It is a process in which a woman and her family are willing to help somebody have a child. And it is premised on an interaction and a relationship, even if it's limited in time, between that person and that family and the family they're helping form.
Right.
Surrogacy cannot, practically, ethically, and politically, it cannot be done any other way. So what we were concerned about is that the tools that have been used in other areas of life to bridge these gaps were not appropriate here. Namely, finding intermediaries that are willing to step in and handle that relationship for you. So you can do that when you're buying cars, when you're buying real estate, when you're, interacting in many other commercial ways, but you can't do that with surrogates.
Yeah.
And that's what's been happening a lot. While some of these intermediaries are more ethical than others, some of them are more real than others. We've heard a lot of unfortunate stories of fraud and people who, intermediaries who pretended to provide these services and then vanished. But even if those intermediaries are, and they call themselves agents, even those agents or intermediaries are real and do their best, it's inappropriate to step in and tell the intended parents, let us deal with the surrogate. You're not suitable to do that. We will make sure everything, is delivered in 9 months and you have a baby at your footsteps. That's not how it works.
Yeah.
It can't work. So it was important for us to make sure on several levels, and I think we've achieved that quite successfully, if I may say so myself. A, to communicate what I just said, to explain what surrogacy is, to let people understand in their language, because everything there you saw was either in Chinese. Much of the presentations were in Chinese, and we had a wonderful group of local partners and parents who helped us communicate that, or it was translated. We wanted to first communicate that. We wanted to give people the opportunity to firsthand get a sense of what surrogacy is by listening to a surrogate, to a couple of surrogates, to parents who've been through the process, even to a teenager born through surrogacy, a grandmother, a prospective grandmother, about how she, about her perspective about the new family that is being formed. People got the ability to get a good sense of how it feels, how the personal dynamics work. And then they also get the opportunity to better understand the process, so demystify and break it down into manageable steps, so that they are no longer as intimidated about this and think that they absolutely need to have the intermediaries for the logistical aspects, but also allowing them to meet a wide range of professionals from the United States and Canada that were there and that have internal resources who speak Chinese.
I absolutely love how you said that this is not a commercial transaction of some kind of product. It's a human connection. It's human coming together, building a relationship and creating a family. And you could see that in a room during the conference. If the person on the stage was a doctor or from an agency talking about the process and the steps, you look around and all the men in the audience will take notes, will pay attention, eager to learn, to understand. And then when on the stage we have panelists of surrogates and the daughter and the parents, right? No one will take notes. They were just like listening and connecting with their emotions. It was just such an experience. It was beautiful to witness.
I mean, somebody once mentioned that you sit through, a session and you see that nobody looks at their phones.
Yeah, so they don't.
And people expect to get checklists and tips and stuff like that, but you're right. Every now and then they just had to drop their pens or their whatever devices they were taking notes with, and just absorb the subjective aspects of this, because this is a subjective experience. It's not just some sort of a checklist or a procedure that you can recite. And I think they also gathered a lot of encouragement and support and energy from their fellow prospective parents.
Yes.
When you're either dealing with some agent one-on-one or you're on your computer getting information, you don't have your bearings. You don't know, you don't have perspective. Where are you? Who else is doing this? Is this... It's really out of context.
Yes.
And having hundreds of people around you, all seeking the same dream, all pursuing the same path, I think I know from all of our conferences, is a very empowering and important element of what this experience is.
Yes.
It cannot be done virtually. And part of this, part of what made it possible and what is part of what I just mentioned, is the fact that we did not just land there, literally, and somehow transfer this information. This was a process of almost 2 years, and we had 5 local organizations from the region, mostly from Taiwan, who partnered with us, but including also from Hong Kong. And we've had 50 volunteers and people from Taiwan taking part in running the conference and also conveying that information and helping guide other people. And we've forged long-term relationship that are allowing us already to expand our financial assistance program to Taiwan and Hong Kong first, and hopefully other countries, maybe New Zealand as well, at some point. So it is not just a presentation. It's not a show. It's not a theater event. It was a lot more than that.
It was. And I cannot stop talking about it since. But now, for the time that we have remaining here, I want to find out more about the other part of your organization, the GPAP program. What is it and what that does?
And that is almost the main reason we created MHB, in the sense that at the time, the seminars existed even before the organization was incorporated at the LGBT Center in New York, and they were growing, at the same rate as it was already, but really bothered by the fact that, of course, a lot of men can't afford the process. We would have people come to our monthly workshops, which we have in several locations beyond the conferences. And I would notice that they come month after month, even after we finish the whole year of curriculum, just because it was a support, group for them. And they just still didn't have savings to start with the journey. So we thought we needed to do something about it. The first thing we did about those rating and reviews table, because one thing they also provide is the ability for people to become aware of places where maybe surrogacy is less expensive. In particular, the United States, at the time and even today, sometimes, if you go to the Midwest, it might not be as expensive as the West and the East Coast. Right. Specific agencies have different rates and different compensation schemes with the surrogates. Of course, clinics range in, experience, quality, as well as cost. So the first thing is what you want to do to empower, a group of people is to give them more information, give them more access so that they can, as much as I hate to use the word, shop around. The next thing we wanted is to provide a financial assistance. And that started a process that I'm happy to say we're in our 5th year of GPAP and help every year about 20 couples and singles with what I call everything, in the sense that they get both free clinic, agency, and legal services, as well as a cash grant from us. And we also have more than 100 couples and singles a year that are getting partial assistance in what we call stage 1. They are currently, I think, in 12 countries. For us to be able to expand GPAP to a new country, we need to have an LGBT association, possibly an LGBT family association, if possible, even that is partnering with us at that country. And since screening process involves aspect that we need to be informed, of course, if it's an English-speaking country, it's a little easier. We can read the tax documents, but we don't know what tax documents to even ask for. The process is complex. People can go to our website and see the stage 1 and stage 2, what the criteria are. I don't know if we have enough time to get into that, but I would just say, to the extent that people might be listening to this from around the Asia Pacific area, we still do not have eligibility for people in Australia or New Zealand. So if somebody's interested, they should just reach out to us if they have in mind an organization in their country that might be willing to collaborate with us. And then we can expand GPAP to residents of that country as well.
I love it. And what will be the best way for somebody to reach out to you?
So first and foremost, our website, menhavingbabies.org. If they have a general question or they want to approach us about any of the issues I just mentioned, they should write an email to team@menhavingbabies.org.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And in closing, do you have any advice for intended parents?
I would say you're probably not aware of how much you're not aware of. My suggestion would be do that favor to yourself, because you might not be aware of some of the risks along the way. We actually know from our surveys, because we also have surveys among prospective parents, that people tend to underestimate how much it's going to cost them in the magnitude of 20%. And we talk about a process that could usually, depending whether it's the United States or Canada, run at least $120,000, $130,000 American dollars. When you talk about this order of magnitude, you're talking about a lot of money that you might not realize initially. Mm-hmm. you might not make, accurate decisions and assessments up front. So it might seem like a lot to, get on an airplane and go somewhere if it's not in your own local city and country. But the reality is that this is one of the most complex and unfortunately expensive journeys you'll have in your life, but also the most consequential. And to date, I really don't think there is an alternative but doing some of it face-to-face and immerse yourself in this entire material and maybe find access to some resources and maybe even assistance that you weren't aware it was there.
Great advice. Thank you. And instead of goodbye, I just want to express my respect for the work that you are doing and the work that you have been doing for the past 20 years. I truly believe that you are impacting the future in a way that men could have their own children, and this whole process is just going to be another norm.
I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning in to Redefine Family, a Spark Transformation podcast. Feel free to share your story, knowing that your story could change someone's life. We invite you to spread the love by sharing our message with others. And leave your comments at spark@redefinefamily.com. Until next time, remember that you are the spark in your life. Just shine bright.